Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on Perspectives, remembering Henry Louis Hank Aaron. 50 years ago this week on April 8th, 1974, Mobile's Hank Aaron was cemented as a legend in sports history when he broke Babe Ruth's all-time home run baseball hitting record of 714, baseball's most cherished record at the time. Hank's team, the Atlanta Braves, were playing the Los Angeles Dodgers at Atlanta's Fulton County Stadium. And according to many baseball experts, Hank Aaron was one of the greatest baseball players in the world. And some fans believe that the Mobile native is just one of the biggest reasons the port city has such a storied history in baseball. In one author's opinion, Mobile can lay claim to arguably baseball's greatest hitter in Hank Aaron. The author also goes on to say that the greatest pitcher in baseball was Mobile's Satchel Paige, and the greatest fielder, Ozzie Smith. Now, for more than 130 years, professional baseball in Lower Alabama has been a part of Mobile's history. Baseball in the port city dates back to 1886. Monroe Park and Hartwell Field featured numerous teams. The teams also competed independently and in the Southern Association and the Southern League. Many Mobile players starred in the Negro Leagues. There's a picture of an 18-year-old Henry Aaron in 1958 at the train station in Mobile. He was preparing to leave for his first job in pro baseball with the Indianapolis Clowns of the Negro Leagues. Now, after the integration of minor and Major League Baseball, many players like Hank Aaron became stars and featured players in the big leagues. Aaron also became a father figure and a big brother for some of the younger players, and he looked out for them during their playing careers as well. Our guest today on Perspectives, Tom Withers, a lifelong friend of Henry Louis Hank Aaron, and baseball and sports enthusiast and author Joey Warner. Well, after a quick break this morning, we'll hear from Tom as well as about the times that he spent with Hank Aaron and what it was like for Hank to become a Major League Baseball all-time home run hitter. We'll also speak with Joey Warner. He's an author and sports writer who has also spent years spotlighting the amazing careers of Mobile's baseball greats, including, of course, hammering Hank Aaron. They both will join us in just a moment this morning when Perspectives continues. And welcome back. Today on Perspectives, we're talking with Tom Withers as well as Joey Warner as we talk about a very special date that happened this week. And, you know, it's amazing how fast the days we were getting ready for April 8th, and then all of a sudden it's here and it's gone again. But a very special day in baseball. And, you know, it's always fun to share with people, but growing up in Atlanta, my hometown, I was there for the game, and I remember it. I was part of that crowd with my dad, and to see what happened there, but all the excitement was about what had happened. And Hank had tied a record the end of the last season before, and then here we were for this one, and the Dodgers, and that pitch came out from Al Downing. Now, Tom, you had known Hank since high school days, so you were aware of all of I guess you could say what had happened to him along the way, going to the Negro Leagues for Indianapolis, and then, of course, making it into the Major Leagues, and having played in Milwaukee, but now he was in Georgia, right next door in Atlanta. What was that like for you as you were seeing and experiencing a very special moment in baseball history?
Well, at the time I was in Mobile, I was home, and I knew that his whole family was getting ready to go up to Atlanta. And I know at that time he had a lot of pressure on him. He had one guy by the name of Cleon Jones. He retired now with the New York Mets. And he would talk to Cleon all the time, and that's when he was receiving all the hate mail. And Cleon told him, say, I know you're going through a whole lot, but Cleon would always talk to him as a businessman. He said, you know what you got to do, Hank? Take care of business. And I'll always remember that. Cleon told me that. The next a couple of days, he was going through it, but he never was afraid. He was humble. He would go to the park, and the next thing I know, I was home watching the game, and he hit it. And when he hit it, I never will forget, Mrs. Era, she was so sweet. She ran out that stadium, and she grabbed it. And I told my wife right then, I said, she ain't gonna turn him loose. I said, she's gonna hold him, she's gonna protect him.
Right, that's right.
And that's what they did. But it was a great memories for me that night.
Yes.
And I always remember it, and I'll keep that until I get out of here.
Well, I appreciate you wearing the jersey today. You've got your jersey that Hank gave you. He signed, autographed it, and of course, it's got that familiar Braves look to it. Is that from 1974, that jersey, or the year he retired?
After he broke the record, he was signing so many autographs. He came in and he called me. He said, "You home?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Pick me up at the airport, me and Billy." So I went to the airport, picked him up, and I took him to his mama's. And he said, "Let's go by your house." I went by and sit there with my wife, and the next thing he said, "I got something for you." He said, "You've been good to me," and he signed it, and I always I don't wear it every day. I just use it when I can.
Right.
You know.
Well, we appreciate you wearing it today.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
That's it. And we're going to talk about some more of that, because that wasn't the only time that you would pick him up either from the airport or even in Atlanta and bring him back down here to Mobile over the years. Joey Warner, I've known for a few years. Our daughters played basketball under Joey's leadership back in the day. And always, Joey, you have been a sports enthusiast. And of course, you turned that into writing for both the newspaper as well as creating your own vehicles to share the sports stories locally. But then you understood the importance of Mobile's baseball history. So when we look at that, how important was that on April 8th to the history of Mobile's baseball?
Oh my goodness. You know, I was 11 years old back then.
Okay.
And I was playing Little League Baseball, and with the sports page and box scores, I knew a whole lot, just like everybody did, about baseball. And the Atlanta Braves weren't the best team, but we had Hank Aaron.
Right,
And
that's right.
Hank, you mentioned earlier the greatest baseball player ever, and when they go to voting on that, you know, it's going to be between Hank and Babe Ruth. And, but Hank broke Babe Ruth's record on April 8th, 1974, and it did so much for Mobile. It even though we had Satchel Paige before, back in the Jackie Robinson era, and the Negro Leagues and what he did for Mobile, but Hank kind of followed Satchel and just did wonderful things. 715 home runs, you know. He was 40 years old when he hit 715, and that was a time in baseball when baseball was everything, you know, especially as a kid, and it did wonders for Mobile, and still does. And when people think about Hank Aaron, I wish they knew more that he was from Mobile. He's from Mobile, and most people do, but a lot of people don't. And hopefully we can get that word out, and it's just an honor to be here to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Hank Aaron's 715th home run.
Right. It's hard to believe it's been 50 years, and as you mentioned, we were both kids at the time, and so a lot has changed over that time in the sport. And of course, the attendance numbers, the amount of teams now, and then you look at I guess you could say, what happened with WTBS and baseball on cable TV did a lot for the game, where a lot of people were able to watch who had not been able to attend a game in the past. I remember having my little transistor radio that was about the size of your wallet, you know, and that was how we would listen to the ball games at night, getting a chance to hear Hank and the guys play. And it was a special time for me growing up there, because I think the Braves moved to Atlanta 65, 66 for that 66 season. And so we had not had a team in Atlanta other than the minor league teams that were playing in the Southern League. And so this was a chance for us to see all these big league players. And I remember seeing Cleon Jones coming through there, and some of the other guys, trying to think of some of the names now, but from the Ernie Banks from the Chicago Cubs. And then, of course, one of Hank's friends, but also an Alabama native, Willie Mays. He came through there with the San Francisco Giants. So what was it like for you all living in Mobile and hearing these stories of Hank and how well he was doing? Did it mean a lot?
To me as a kid, I mean, you couldn't help but idolize Hank Aaron. And then when you watched him hit, and he hit with so much, swung with so much grace. I mean, players don't swing like that today. They're doing all this velocity stuff and the sabermetrics. Hank Aaron got up there and swung at the pitch he was looking for, and moved his wrist and swung his hips, and there the ball went. And he hit the ball out of the park. And young kids dreamed of doing that. And you know, of course, Babe Ruth was ripping them out of the park, but Hank Aaron did it with grace, and he was humble. And it was just outstanding to watch him. I mean,
and I enjoyed going to Fulton County Stadium. Sometime when I go to the games, a lot of guys from Mobile, Driscoll, and all of them would come up, and they always wanted to come into Fulton County Stadium and see the ball players. And I told Hank, I said, a lot of your friends out there, after the game, he said, well, I tell you what, I'm going to get security. Security took me back to the gate, and he let Driscoll in with about 8 or 10 of his friends from Mobile, and they had a chance to go into the dressing room and meet all the players. Dusty Baker was there. I had a chance to meet Dusty, and Tommy Aaron was there.
Right, and Tommy is who?
That's Hank's brother.
Hank's brother, that's right.
And they played baseball together.
That's right.
Both of them was hard hitters, but everybody, Hank was hitting the home runs. My boy Tommy come up with a double. They always wanted home runs.
Right.
But those were the good days. Good days up there with him. I had a chance to meet Willie Mays in Birmingham. He's a fine guy. He and Hank were real close, you know.
Yeah, some great pictures of them. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about April 8th, 1974, and of course, most specifically about hammering Hank Aaron, local Mobile native who made it to the top, and of course, one of the greatest in Major League Baseball. More on Perspectives right after this. Welcome back. Our guests today, Tom Withers and Joey Warner. We're talking about Hank Aaron, his breaking the all-time baseball home run record back in 1974. It happened this week. April 8th was a day that a lot of great baseball fans will never forget. And of course, you all both have even more of a connection because longtime friend from high school period of time for Hank, and then of course Joey, a longtime baseball enthusiast and author now, as well as documenting the history of the great players from this area. So we were talking a little bit about the opportunity you had to meet some of the other players as well, Tom, after the game with going up to see Hank there in Atlanta. When you think about that year, 74, what was the release you saw in Hank of, say, the pressure being off when he had hit that home run? I know that Dusty Baker and some of the other guys, and you mentioned Cleon Jones, who's also a Mobile native, who was telling him just, you know, go in there and get it done. And this was, I guess, was that the first week of the season? I remember it was one of the first home stands for the Braves that year in 74. I guess that may be one of the first games of the season that year.
Well, it was a very, I don't know how to explain it that night when he broke the record. Of course, he was receiving a whole lot of threats, and he had a detective there in Mobile, Alabama. He was from Atlanta, and he asked me to come up, and my wife told me to say, go up there with him. He was receiving all these threats. So I relieved the detective there in Atlanta, and he would always kind of keep himself together. We would spend time at night watching television, but all the letters, the threats was upstairs. He never brought them out or read them or anything. But one particular night he'd say, I think I want to go get a haircut. And he had a friend of his who was a barber, and he had a chair in the house. So we got in the car and went over there. I'll never forget this. It kind of shook me up that night. After he got the haircut, we was coming home, police call, stopped us. I said, oh Lord, here it go again, threats. So they got out the car, came over to Hank's one and asked him for his license. He gave him the license. He said, we got a big one tonight. we got Hank Aaron here. He said, "Hey, could you sign these autographs for me?" So my heart, my pressure went down there, and I said, "Lord, we're in trouble tonight."
Oh,
you know?
goodness.
So,
and what part of Atlanta were you driving through at that time? You remember offhand?
well, it was not too far from his house.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know too much about Atlanta, and Hank was driving. He didn't drive too much, but that was a experience I'll always keep.
Right,
I
right.
tell my grandchildren about that experience I had that night.
Yeah.
I say, "Here it goes."
Oh, goodness. Well, I remember Hank's. Well, I don't remember which house he was living at that time, but if he was in Southwest Atlanta, he was okay that night. You know. Joey, when you look back in that period of time, what were your thoughts when you heard of some of the things that Hank had to suffer through like that with the threats? Did that hit you here? And of course, you were just, not quite 13 yet. So, but what were your thoughts when you heard about that?
Well, I didn't really know about that, because I was so into baseball.
Mm-hmm.
As we remember, Willie Mays, as y'all mentioned, it was Willie and Hank that were competing against each other. And when I was listening to transistor radio just like you,
Okay.
listening to Milo Hamilton and Ernie Johnson.
Right, that's right.
And loved the Braves, but I was a Pirates guy. And Willie Stargell was my favorite. And Willie hit 48 home runs in '73, and I think Hank hit 47, most for both of them in a career. But anyway, and Hank finally passed Willie Mays, and it's like a 15-round heavyweight
Right.
fight, and Willie kind of gave up. But being both of them from Alabama, and in fact, years and years ago, when Willie was with the New York Giants and Hank was with the Boston Braves, I believe, signed Hank for $50. There's $50 difference, or the Giants, they offered $50 more, or Willie and Hank would have been on the same team. But following them was a great thing for a child, a young boy. But the things that he went through were tough when I finally figured it out. And I was embarrassed, totally embarrassed. And you mentioned earlier about, I think the Braves opened up in Cincinnati in '74, and the Braves hometown people in Atlanta were wanting him to hit a home run in Atlanta.
In Atlanta.
And Bowie Kuhn, who was the commissioner, ordered Hank to play. And Eddie Minton, a sports writer here in Mobile, wrote a good story on it, and which I've got it through research, and he wasn't happy. Nobody was happy about it, but because they wanted the record to be broken in Atlanta.
Right.
And when it came to Atlanta, Bowie Kuhn, the commissioner, had other arrangements and couldn't be there. That was a disgrace to Major League Baseball. And I'm sorry, that's just the way it is.
Right.
But when I heard about some of the things that went on, it's disgraceful. Same way with Jackie Robinson way back then. But when you look at the Negro Leagues, and so many of them from Mobile that went through it, including Hank and Willie, and Billy Williams,
Satchel,
and Satchel Paige, these guys took a lot, but they represented themselves as some of the greatest baseball players to ever live.
Yeah. Well, from that point, Hank then went on to pass the record and hit 755 home runs as he closed out. And, it's great that things have evolved the way they have today. When you look at your time with Hank, Tom, in the latter years, you had a lot to do with him enjoying his time down here at the Hank Aaron Stadium. Joey got a chance to hang out with him on the front porch there at his house. How did Hank feel about that stage of his life after he was looking back as retired and now, of course, a baseball exec, but he was having a lot to do with helping younger players come up now through the major leagues?
Well, he was spending a lot of time at his stadium, the park over there in Tobinville, and he always had he loved a guy by the name of Slack. They got a golf cart place out there, and anytime he would come in, he would get with Mr. Slack. And he would drive him around the park, and when they had the groundbreaking of the stadium over here in his name, Mr. Slack would pick him up in his golf cart, and they were talking old times.
Yeah, I remember.
And
Mr.
they
Slack.
had so much fun together. I would see them together. And at that time, my wife's nephew, Sullivan, was on the breaking of it too. We broke ground. Senator Figures, a bunch of us. But he always had good thoughts about Mobile. And he would come to the park, talk to the kids. I remember one time we went out to high school up in Chickasaw. He and a guy by the name of Joe Kennedy. Joe Kennedy was from Mobile. He was the principal up in Milwaukee when Hank was there. And he went up, and my grandchildren was up there at school, and he took time. He said, "Come on, let's go see your kids."
Yeah.
And he signed all the autographs of the kids, and oh, it was beautiful.
Bless a lot of hearts.
Had a lot of hearts.
We'll close out, Joy. Tell me quickly, how was it for you that day at Hank Aaron Stadium at the Hank Aaron home? You got about 20 seconds.
Oh, wow. Hey, when I got there, y'all were inside, and everybody was outside. I said, "What's going on?" So I went inside, and I got in there. I had a book, one of my first books to give Hank. And I said, "I saw you and Cassandra McAvoy." And I said, "Can I see him? I got to give him this book." You said, "You better hurry." And like, I'm hurrying now. And so I said, "Oh man, where's my phone?" And I was getting ready to run out and go get my phone. And then Cassandra said, "Cassandra, will you take a picture?" So I got to give him the picture right here.
There it is.
And she took 2 pictures. Yeah. And by the time I got outside in the parking lot, she done sent me the pictures. So it was an outstanding moment. One of the last times I think he came to Mobile in 2017. It was a great time.
Guys, thank you all both very much for coming and sharing today. And hopefully it's created some excitement for those Hank Aaron fans who are watching the program today. Joy Warner and Tom Withers. Thank you very much.
It's been a great honor. Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you, buddy.
And for more information where you can find more with Joy's books, go to wjtaw@aol.com. There's a phone number to call as well for the Mobile Baseball Connection. And check us out where you can see more of Tom as well. Until next time, have a great day.